3 match points saved, a first set tiebreak that went all the way to 9-7. And on the other side of the net, the same woman who 3 years earlier had personally handed her a diploma. By the time the last ball landed, the defending Wimbledon champion was out, and the player who beat her was someone almost nobody outside the tennis world had heard of a year ago. Rewind 3 years. Eala is standing on a stage at the Rafa Nadal Academy, graduation diploma in hand. The person giving it to her is one of the best players on the planet, Iga Swiatek. It's a nice photo, a proud moment. Nobody in that room could have guessed that the student in that picture would one day be the one to end her mentor's title defense on center court, in front of thousands. Fast forward to Wimbledon, 3rd round. The seating chart says everything you need to know about expectations. Swiatek, defending champion, multiple Grand Slam winner. Eala, 29th seed, talented, but still proving herself in most people's eyes. Then, the first set goes to a tiebreak. Swiatek saves 2 match points. The tension in that stadium could have cracked concrete. And in that exact moment, the moment most young players fold, Alexeala didn't blink. She closed it out 7-6, then walked through the second set 6-2. 2 hours and 14 minutes, one of the biggest upsets of the tournament. And when it was over, she dropped to her knees in tears. Here's the question nobody was asking that day. How does a player who used to lose to good competition suddenly find the nerve to close out the defending champion on the biggest stage in tennis? The answer didn't start at Wimbledon. It started weeks earlier, in a fight almost nobody was watching. For years, there was a pattern in Alex's results that quietly ate away at her confidence. It wasn't about talent. Her game had always had power and promise. It was about one specific type of opponent. Match after match against players from the Czech Republic, and match after match, the result went the same way. A long, painful losing streak that followed her from tournament to tournament, city to city, season to season. You know how this works if you've ever choked on something small enough times that it stopped being small. Every time a Czech name showed up in the draw, a voice in the back of her head asked the same question before the first point was even played. What if it happens again? She never talked about quitting. She just kept showing up to practice, kept adjusting, kept believing the pattern could break even when the results kept saying otherwise. Then came Birmingham. On paper, just a tune-up event before the real prize in London. For Alex, it was something else entirely, a chance to finally answer the question that had been following her around for years. Waiting in the final, another Czech opponent, Nicola Bartonkova. Almost 2 on the nose to be a coincidence. Bartonkova took the first set. And just like that, every old doubt came rushing back in. Was this going to be number 15? This time, the answer came from her racket. She stayed composed, trusted the game she'd built, and clawed back to win the next 2 sets, taking the Birmingham title and finally breaking the curse that had trailed her for years. That trophy wasn't really about Birmingham. It was proof to herself, more than anyone, that history isn't a life sentence. And she carried that proof straight into Wimbledon. So when she walked onto the grounds in London, something had shifted. She wasn't there hoping to survive a few rounds. She had just proven, days earlier, that she could rewrite a story people thought was already finished. Still, nobody outside her team circled her name on the list of contenders. The headlines were reserved for the usual suspects: Swiatek, the other Grand Slam champions, the familiar faces. Eala's run was building quietly, match by match, largely unnoticed by anyone not paying close attention. That suited her fine. She had learned a long time ago that predictions don't win matches. Preparation does. Round by round, something in her game kept sharpening. The footwork looked cleaner, the shot selection looked smarter. The signature lefty power that used to be promising but raw was now landing exactly where she wanted it, against exactly the players who were supposed to be too good for her. Then, the draw did something almost cinematic. It paired her with Iga Swiatek, the same Swiatek who once put a diploma in her hands, the defending champion, a 6-time Grand Slam winner, the player most people had already picked to go deep into the second week. It read like a script nobody would greenlight for being too obvious. The student versus the mentor, the underdog versus the favorite. Everyone thought they already knew the ending. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Walking onto center court, Alex wasn't just facing a tough draw. She was facing someone who had already won 6 Grand Slam titles and spent years ranked at the very top of the sport. By reputation alone, this should not have been close. It wasn't close in the way anyone expected, it just went the other direction. From the opening games, she wasn't playing to survive. She was playing to win. Every return had intention behind it. Every rally, she pushed the pace instead of absorbing it. And when that first set tiebreak arrived and Witek clawed back to save 2 match points, the easy thing to do would have been to tighten up. She didn't. Third match point, she took it clean, controlled, no hesitation. You could feel the crowd shift in real time. First, it was polite applause for good shots. Then it turned into something louder, something that comes only when a room realizes it isn't watching a normal match anymore, it's watching history happen in real time. By the end of the second set, it was done. 7-6, 6-2. The defending champion out in the third round. The 29th seed into the second week of a Grand Slam for the first time in her career, the first Filipina in the Open era to reach that stage at Wimbledon. On court afterward, still catching her breath, she could barely get a full sentence out. She started talking about what this meant for someone who grew up in the Philippines, and the words just stopped. The moment was bigger than she could put into language right there on the spot. That's the part highlight reels tend to skip, not the scoreline. The half-finished sentence of a 21-year-old realizing, in real time, everything that led to this second. The little girl who trained after school in the Philippines. The 13-year-old who left home for Spain, chasing something that had no guarantee attached to it. The teenager who once stood on a stage accepting a diploma from a champion. All of it collapsed into one tiebreak, one match point, one moment on center court. And then the world outside tennis caught up fast. Clips of the match were everywhere within the hour. Commentators who'd barely mentioned her name before kickoff were now calling it one of the tournament's defining upsets. Millions of people who had never heard of Alexeala were suddenly typing her name into a search bar. She met Catherine, Princess of Wales, and later called it an honor she wouldn't forget. Billie Jean King spent time with her after the run, a genuine passing of respect from one generation of the sport to the next. Back home, the reaction went even further. Crowds at the airport waiting just to see her walk through, and a presidential citation from Ferdinand Marcos Jr., recognizing what her run meant for an entire country watching. And through all of it, the headlines, the photos, the sudden fame, she stayed remarkably unmoved. She knew exactly what it took to get there. The losses that hurt, the years away from home, the long stretch where a Czech opponent could still get inside her head. None of that magically disappears because of one great tournament, which might be exactly why so many people connected with her. Not just because she won, because she never pretended the win was the whole story. She wasn't finished either. Weeks earlier, in the lead-up to the grass season, she'd shared a doubles court with 7-time Grand Slam champion Venus Williams, and instead of treating it like a photo opportunity, she treated it like a masterclass. Watching how Venus carried herself on and off the court and trying to absorb as much of it as she could. By the end of the grass season, fans didn't just admire the run. They voted her the Waters star of the grass court swing, taking nearly 90% of the public vote. Not a panel, not a committee. The fans decided. So what happens now? The US Open is next. And if you ask her team, the conversation isn't about fame or rankings at all. It's about preparation, about the next adjustment, about staying exactly as hungry as she was the week before anyone knew her name. Because one tournament doesn't make a career. Consistency does. From a kid practicing after school in the Philippines to a 13-year-old who left everything behind for a shot in Spain, to the player who beat her own mentor on the biggest stage in tennis, every step of this was built on the boring, unglamorous stuff. Discipline, repetition, and a refusal to let one losing streak define her. The scorelines will keep changing. The rankings will keep moving. But here's the one thing that already feels permanent. Eala didn't just win a tennis match at Wimbledon. She proved that a losing streak isn't a life sentence, and somewhere, a whole generation of kids just found a new reason to believe that.